Welcome to yet another episode of the Road to the ProcureTech Cup, the show that teaches procurement professionals the art of the possible with procurement technology. This is episode 15, the 14th demo in this season. I'm going to start by bringing on my co-host, Gabe Perez, Chief Strategy Officer at RiseNow. How's it going, Gabe?
It's going great. How you doing, Joel?
I'm pretty good. How was your week?
Week's been good, busy as always. Was in New York City some this week, now back in a rainy California, and super excited for this demo. As the sourcing optimization space is somewhere I've spent some time and I think is extremely powerful and valuable for the right organization. So excited to see Keelvar today.
Absolutely. I know it's a space you know well. So Keelvar on the show today, as we mentioned, Gabe just mentioned, just a reminder that we're on the road to the ProcureTech Cup. The journey continues. So September 15th, we launched things off with a P2P provider, Airbase, and we've made it all the way to December 13th with Keelvar here today. Next week, we have a holiday edition of the show, so no demo, but certainly some fun to be had. And then we'll pick back up in January, on January 10th, with Viridian and make it all the way to the end of March before the ProcureTech Cup tournament starts off. So before getting into the agenda, I'm just going to bring our guests here, Jack and Alan. So we've got Jack Delane, Chief of Staff at Keelvar, and Alan Holland, CEO at Keelvar. Thanks for being with us, gentlemen. We're really excited to have you on the show.
Hi, Joel and Gabe. Delighted to join you.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
Very cool. So agenda, just remind everybody that Jack and Alan are going to give us a company overview, what Keelvar does, its unique value proposition and ideal customer profile. We're going to get into a solution demo, which is going to be about 15 minutes, give or take. Then Gabe will help us keep things real in the Let's Get Real segment, making sure to ask the tough questions around, okay, nice demo, but how do we actually make this work in client contexts? And in your context, if you're watching, right? So feel free to ask questions in the chat if you see things that you're wondering about as we go through the presentation. And finally, we'll do the mapping to the ProcureTech Cup market map. So on that note, Jack, I'll hand it over to you and feel free to kick things off.
Thanks, Joel. I'm going to introduce Alan, who's going to take us through our company overview.
Thanks, Jack. So yes, I'm Alan Holland, the founder and CEO at Keelvar, and our mission is to scale sourcing excellence and tackle one of the grand challenges of procurement, in that trying to achieve best practice across your entire organization, and for Keelvar to become the one-stop shop for all of sourcing. So a little bit about us. We're a SaaS company headquartered in Ireland. We have over 40 million in venture capital funding behind us. We're growing very quickly. But what is of most interest to many of our, target customers and our existing customers is that we came from an AI research lab. We spun out of a university. So we're very deep, expertise in many subfields of AI, because we see AI and intelligent systems as the key to unlocking that grand challenge of procurement and achieving and scaling sourcing excellence across the entire enterprise. And who are we working with? Well, some of the world's largest enterprises. In fact, almost half of the Fortune 500 are working with us, and we're optimizing and automating over $200 billion in spend annually for a very large number of global blue chip companies. So on the next slide, we'll see a selection of some of the companies we work with, and there are many, the leaders in their respective industries. And a common thread throughout many of these companies is that they're large enterprises with supply chains. And from Maersk to Mars and Volvo, Logitech, Apple, Microsoft, and so on, many of the leaders in their respective enterprises choose Keelvar. And they choose Keelvar because we have built the easiest to use sourcing optimizer, so they can scale best practice in all of their strategic sourcing activities. But equally importantly, we've wrapped automation around sourcing optimization, so we can scale it to hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of sourcing events. So our strategy with customers and the way we help them achieve that goal of scaling sourcing excellence is to start with what some companies regard as the low-hanging fruit, and this is their strategic sourcing projects. They could be a small number of very large projects. When they apply optimization, very often the biggest shock to the system for them if they're new to optimization is that they start saving tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars very quickly. And so making the case for scaling that approach and applying it to all of your tactical and tail spend, it becomes a very easy one once they've seen the benefits in the strategic sourcing. So the next step is about automating and choosing categories where they can start to build their bots and start automating even, prescriptive processes. Doesn't need to be AI based, but then they can move up the value chain and start applying AI and intelligent systems. But a key stepping stone to scaling sourcing excellence tends to be integrating with existing systems, pulling demand from upstream systems, exporting results to downstream systems, but also for us and our customers to work with partners, because very often, we're working within an ecosystem. They want to pull data from benchmark systems or ERP system or transfer management system, whatever the case may be, for these automated workflows to work seamlessly. And that's what leads to basically growth within their business, scaling of excellence, and achieving results that they never thought possible. So the next slide shows an example of a customer that came to us in our Keelvar Connect event in Atlanta. And they were very pleased with their expansion of sourcing optimization. They trained up more users. They were running more events, leveraging optimization, saving tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. But when they came to us, we said, you need to revisit your ambitions here. There's so much more that's possible. If they started applying automation to some of the sourcing activities, they could do 10x or 20x that. So they said they'd give it a go, and this is what happened next. So within 6 months of saying, yeah, let's start with automation, they are now automating and optimizing over 1,000. So it's following months, they've gone higher again, right? So over 1,000 sourcing events per month, and doing so, saving a lot of money, but also doing their sourcing so much faster that the rest of the organization is saying, hey, hang on, guys, what the heck has happened over in procurement? How are you doing your job hundreds of times or even 1,000 times faster than what we were used to seeing previously? Because the average cycle time has gone from 16,500 minutes, that's over 11.5 days, down to 9 minutes. There's two factors involved in that. There's obviously automating every single task, but because we're able to control the bid and say, as soon as we get 3 bids within a certain range of each other, we're closing the bid. So the market started to learn these are the fastest buyers in the market. So they became the customer of choice. So every other customer is behind them in the list of those waiting to get responses from suppliers. So that's how they've achieved such amazing speed.
So Alan, it looks like, the Keelvar was born out of the sourcing optimization space, and which transportation is a big category. But with the numbers you're showing here, it really seems like you've evolved more into the autonomous sourcing. Can you explain sort of a little bit more detail around this customer example? Because again, I think for me, right, big eye opener that you're not just a sourcing optimization tool, because there's only a few big sourcing optimization events a year in an organization, but you run 1,000 events. Can you explain a little bit more about the kind of categories you optimized and how you were able to scale to so many events so quickly?
Yeah, so there's a preconception somewhat in the market that sourcing optimization was just for the big stuff, because it was the tool that could do the heavy lifting on large or complex data sets. But if you're going to market and if you just 2 or 3 items, and if you want to collect bids of the form, well, if I win A and B, I'll give a discount on C. Then you're inviting optimization, right? So it's a technology that works just as well on small sourcing events, and the percentage savings you can achieve is actually similar, very similar. So there's been kind of I would say, a waste in terms of not applying this type of sourcing process and best practice across all of sourcing. So what we're saying to our customers is automate best practice. You don't need that many experts who know how to use a sourcing optimization tool. Instead, you just need a few who can craft the best workflows and design once, operate hundreds or thousands of times. So I might hand over to Jack for the demo, and so you can see a little bit of how this works.
All right, and yeah, I'm curious to see it at play, right? Because I saw it on your website as well. You said like all categories, all types of spend, etc. So very, very excited to see what this looks like in action. So Jack, we'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to give a very much a whistle-stop tour of some of the key parts of Keelvar and Sourcing Optimizer and also autonomous sourcing. We're going to start first on the first pillar that Alan presented. So that's establishing best practice. So let me set the scene. You can think of me as a global category manager. I work in in the category of facilities. I'm responsible for direct material sourcing. Currently, I'm preparing for the biggest annual tender that we run each year. It's of massive significant spend for our organization. This year as well, in particular, my leadership have come to me and said with the mandate that we need to drive more productivity, and also we need to make sure that we are transforming our sourcing strategy to consider other strategies, for example, ESG as part of that overall strategy. I am super overworked, or super busy at least. I'm, as part of all of the preparation for this tender that I'm working on, there's all of the stakeholder requirements that I'm trying to take on board and consider, all of the supplier prep and management that we'll be including for the tender, all of the data preparation as well for getting the event ready, and all of this within the, the strict time constraints of trying to get everything set up in time to launch. If my sourcing tool is, if it's clunky, if it doesn't deliver the kind of results that I need and values that I want to see, and ultimately it's not getting me the results that I want, it just becomes this kind of arbitrary bid collection tool and I do my analysis offline, that is not going to work. It's not going to drive the kind of productivity results that we want to see. So we have implemented Keelvar, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how it's going to take care of those problems and make my life so much easier so I can focus on the real top aspects for my role. So what we're looking at here, first of all, this is the bid sheet tab in the event that I've created. This is where you'll add all of the data for the sourcing event that you're going to be running, all of the inputs that your bidders are going to be providing. We have an AI tool in Keelvar where you can simply drag and drop in a bid sheet into Keelvar. The AI will recognize the content in your bid sheet, and this can be a bid sheet you've used in previous tenders or other tools. It will recognize it regardless of the format and convert it into a bid sheet that Keelvar can use. From there, best practice really comes out of the box. So what we try to do is make it as easy as possible to utilize all of the best practice functionality in a sourcing event, whether that be formula calculations, feedback inputs, looking at bid validation, but also getting into other settings like controlling how the bidding should be working, the bidding methods you're using, looking at aspects like custom feedback and capacity constraints. All of these functionalities can be toggled on and off at a whim when you need it. So it's really easy to configure the exact kind of sourcing event that you want to run and enable that kind of best practice. So when your event is launched, as you'd expect in Keelvar, it's very easy to track, monitor, understand the kind of overall bidding activity that you're getting. We have in-app messaging as well, so me and all of the other team members that are working on the event can communicate with the bidders or suppliers that are taking part, and they can send us questions. But also we can easily track their overall activity, the lots that they're bidding on. But we can get specific insights into aspects like what the price compression is on the round that we're running, what the price changes that are coming in, understand maybe aspects like what the coverage is, get insights into where we're seeing more and more bid competition and maybe areas where we're seeing less so. And those insights really allow me as a category manager to fine tune the kind of sourcing event that I want to run with ease. So if I see a lot of competition in certain areas, maybe we want to be more aggressive in the kind of feedback that we give to our suppliers to make sure that we're getting the best overall pricing. Or if we need to look at other considerations like bringing in new suppliers for other areas that we want to consider as we go through. So we get great insights into all of the bidding activity overall. After the bidding process is done, the evaluation stage, this is really where the value kind of comes home to roost in Keelvar. So within our scenario evaluation stage, it's possible to create a scenario for any kind of sourcing outcome that you want to see. So say, for example, in my category management role, as I described, first thing I want to see is what the low cost baseline is. I want to understand, what's the cheapest outcome alternative for the sourcing event that I've run? What are the potential savings that we've generated from there? But from there, you can start to build constraints. What does it mean if we remain with our incumbents for this year moving forward? What if we look at other kind of constraints, like limiting the number of suppliers or capping spend with in certain regions? We can consider all of that with ease. But also, it's possible to consider these other non-cost elements, whether it's sustainability, working with the most sustainable suppliers in those cases, but also considering, like, say, for example, lead time or quality scores. All of that can be built into the scenarios with ease, so you can understand what are the kind of optimal outcomes that you want to consider and how to evaluate them.
So if I'm an organization that, there's a lot of rules that are repeatable, but then there might be some rules that are specific to that organization based on the goals they're trying to accomplish. Am I able to write my own rules in here on top of some of the ones that are just toggle on and off?
Oh, yes, of course. You can create any kind of rule that you want. And actually, that's a great point, Gabe, because one of the new features that we've just released is, or will be releasing, so this actually might be a bit of an exclusive, is we have an LLM feature called Intelligent Rules, where you can explain the kind of sourcing outcome that you want to see in plain text, and the scenario will generate the rules that you want from there. So again, we don't want people getting bogged down in technicalities and configuring rules and so on. We want them to focus on the outcomes. So, let Keelvar do the work for you. You describe what you want to see. Keelvar will do the legwork to get you those results.
Just to make sure that was understood, it sounds like you're going to be able to basically tell the system what type of rule you want to write, and it's going to be able to write it for you versus you writing it yourself, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
The challenge with some of these tools, the optimization capability is vast, but it takes a super technical expert to do that optimization capability. And
exactly.
it looks like, you made a point earlier, Alan, that I think is important. You're born out of a university, AI first. AI wasn't an afterthought for you. It sounds like you guys were on the AI train before it became a big buzz in the space.
Yeah, I might chime in there with a point. As the founder of our lab got in contact with me last week, Professor Eugene Freuder, ex-MIT professor, he's a guy who wrote textbooks on AI, saying he loved the feature on LLM's creation of constraints and preferences, because he created a research lab, 50 full-time researcher, with the I suppose the main aim of making AI taking natural language expressions, producing optimizations, models and solutions automatically from that. So what we're getting at here, it's a big step forward in that direction. So he loved it. But anyway, sorry, back to you, Jack.
Thanks, Alan. No, it's totally true. And it's, oh, sorry.
Sorry, Jack, sorry to interrupt. It's just that my mind's going a million miles an hour here, where at the beginning I was able to upload a file, an Excel file, without telling you what the columns are. You figure out what those columns are and add them into your tool. And then later on, I'm able to leverage those same columns that I've added through my own Excel file to say, hey, I'd like to be able to evaluate on X column, a scenario based on X, Y, and Z, right? And then you're able to generate the rules that are basing on the columns I uploaded at the beginning to be able to map out that scenario, right? Would I be correct in assuming that?
Exactly, yeah. And to even elaborate on that as well, we have the same LLM functionality. So if you have custom calculations that you want to generate, so depending on how your total cost is going to be determined, so that may be breakdowns, it might be factoring in material, labor, transport costs, or any kind of components of those. We see those in bigger events as well. They may have complicated, logistics is a classic example that will have complex kind of overall total cost calculations. You can simply describe that again in plain text to this LLM feature. It will generate the formulas for you. And a very neat feature of that is it will do the flip of that as well. So if you have a formula that you want to explain, so for example, if you're working with a team member, you see a big cost model displayed, and the LLM can explain what the components of that are and what it evaluates to in total. So it's all about, we don't want people spending time, working on, the technical details like that. It's about, driving the kind of sourcing outcomes. That's where the value is really created. So let me move to the analyze section. This is, just to wrap it up in terms of sourcing optimizer, as you'd expect, there's a huge library of reports that are available within sourcing optimization. Again, from my perspective as a category manager, these are reports that I can use for my leadership in terms of giving them, an overview of the kind of bidding event that went on. but also specific reports into, say, for example, negotiations with, face-to-face negotiations with suppliers on finalizations of awards. And there's also visualizations that can be created to give you kind of an overview of the kind of the bidding landscape and what's occurred in the event. So that sums up Sourcing Optimizer. So all of this, what we've seen, it saves me time, it saves me effort, it improves the engagement that I've had with my bidders and also my stakeholders. And overall, it's provided, a positive kind of outcome. So the next thing that we want to look at is towards the second and third pillars that Alan described, and that is automating and then scaling best practice. So, what's the one constant, as with all things in life, but in procurement, the only constant is going to be change. After you've optimized your sourcing event, what happens? You're going to be facing some, potential disruptions or market changes or demand fluctuations. These are always going to be challenges that procurement teams are going to face. But they also present opportunities as well that you can, those that can move quickly can capitalize on. So if I'm going to jump over to our autonomous sourcing section, Joel, if you're happy to share that, this is this is how we can address those fluctuations and scale overall best practice. This is another feature, what we call intelligent intake. So this is how you could roll out that same power that we've seen in Sourcing Optimizer to your entire organization. Intelligent intake is where you can enter in natural language the request that you want to source. Say, for example, a logistics request. We say we want to source 3 20-foot containers between Dublin and Rotterdam. Intelligent intake will recommend the appropriate workflow for you. All I have to do is click submit, and it will launch a sourcing request that will use all of the functionality that we saw in Sourcing Optimizer to make sure we're getting the best overall sourcing outcomes. As an organization, so category managers or maybe COEs can create and deploy workflows in any kind of category that they want. We've got several templates that are available, but in any kind of sourcing strategy that they want to implement. Say, for example, we'll take a look at a logistics truckload event. Workflow. What those users can do then is design and deploy a workflow for those automations. So everything from intake through to the bidding and awarding section. You can design this workflow. If you need to amend it, you can do so by simply clicking, dragging, and dropping. There's no code involved in updating these workflows. And once they're published, they are live. And the key thing is that these processes are fully automated or can be fully automated end to end. So the example that Alan talked about with that customer of ours that have scaled to over 1,000 sourcing events, their entire workflow process is automated. So there's no interaction from those users in Keelvar. The requests are sent from an upstream system via API. The autonomous bot completes the entire workflow, takes care of the bidding process, invites the bidders, does the award for them, and then sends that request back downstream to the next system so they can place a purchase order. And it's doing all of that in 9 minutes and getting 3+ bids on every request. That is the kind of scaling that we're seeing with autonomous sourcing. You wouldn't believe those kind of numbers if I didn't see it in person. It's incredible what can be done at that kind of scale. So that kind of sums up like a quick overview of autonomous sourcing. And I can hand it back to you, Joel.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I can see how you've shown us the building blocks, right? We have the event, we can work those manually, we can toggle the settings on and off, and then we sort of create a template for certain categories, certain subcategories, or even certain types of events within a subcategory, right? You could get as granular as you want and then leverage that intake functionality to get the requester to source from A to Z by himself. Before we head over to some tough questions, I'll throw 2 quick questions at you from the audience here. So Adrienne was asking if the low-cost baseline scenario that we discussed when you were looking at the scenario modeling is a cherry pick of all the lowest bids for all items across all bidders.
That's correct. Yeah, and that's a default scenario that will be there in every event to give you an overview of what the sort of competitive landscape is.
And I could see like up to 15, 16 bidders for that lowest cost scenario. So it might not be feasible from a commercial standpoint, but at least it gives you that baseline, as you were mentioning.
Exactly.
And then Monica asks a pretty tough question herself. She says, what are your policies around customer data retention and information provided to your LLM?
So on that side, all customer data is stored. It's not shared amongst customers. It's only used for the customer themselves as we improve our models.
The LLMs aren't trained on customer data, so we use Bedrock within Amazon AWS kind of closed private environments. So there's no leakage, no danger of leakage of any customer data to LLMs to be trained.
I think that's very important to be conscious of that. And I think Monica asked the right question, right? You should be asking all your providers that type of question. Yeah, thanks, Alan and Jack. So on that note, I'll throw it over to Gabe for some tough questions and time to get real.
So we don't have much time left, so I'm going to keep it to one question. And I think it's impressive that you have both a combination of autonomous sourcing and optimization, which sometimes are seen as two different solutions. But if you saw the discussion on LinkedIn earlier this week, and one of the things I've personally experienced in this space is sourcing optimization delivers massive amounts of value, sometimes even more than a single procure-to-pay project. But I don't think it's gotten the traction and the CFO level awareness that it should. Would love your insights in why that is and how procurement and sourcing can bring this to their executive management team, because it can really help with funding enterprise level objectives. So would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess there's a preconception in the market that sourcing optimization was like for the nuclear scientists on a small number of the biggest projects to squeeze out tens or hundreds of millions in savings. But it didn't need to be that way, and for many ways, the reason Keelvar exists is we wanted to burst that misconception, if you like, because most of the value is from some of the simpler features of sourcing optimization. Capturing package bids with conditional discounts, expressive descriptions of economies of scale and scope, expressive capture of preferences and constraints from internal stakeholders, and then the rest should be easy. Just the optimizer does all the work. Now, there are so few people in the world of procurement that appreciate, I suppose, how to use sourcing optimization and when to use it, that it has been underutilized. So our raison d'etre is to say to these organizations, you can automate so much of your sourcing and apply optimization in everything that you can scale those type of ridiculous savings that you get from your strategic sourcing projects to all your tactical and tail as well. So optimize everything when you've got automation like this.
And I guess it's using those category managers' savvy skills and knowledge and experience, and as you say, scaling it, right? You have the tools, so not necessarily replacing them, because all that intelligence, human intelligence, is required to power the
There's a lot of category knowledge and expertise you want to maintain. So crafting those workflows, what we saw with that workflow and orchestration tool, that's where you get your people who know your market, know what you're buying, know what your internal stakeholders need, and they craft a best practice process. Some of those diagrams could start to become larger and larger because the Ohio team want this, the Boston team want that, and the French team want the other. So you have lots of conditions around different markets and so on. But that's I guess that's the challenge for vendors, to support the complexity of the enterprise, but capture that institutional knowledge and automate excellence.
And just for the audience, and I know we're going close to time, just a yes or no here. When you say expressive bids, you're inferring that the suppliers can potentially give you options that were not in your original event, correct?
Exactly, yeah, and express alternatives.
The space for the audience to realize in general is it's not constrained to what you put in the RFX or in the bid. They can actually offer things. I've experienced the value of that with seeing customers use that. So I just want to provide some clarity. So Joel, I know we need to get back over to you to wrap it up with the time coming up.
Yeah, I know. We could probably talk about this for an hour or two, right? So maybe the off season will be the place to do it. So just to wrap up here, Alan, Jack, like as we map Keelvar here to the ProcureTech Cup market map, we saw it in the demo and in the slides, very heavily invested in the sourcing space. We saw some intake management capabilities, light capabilities. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of partnerships, integrations, roadmap that you're excited about at Keelvar?
Yeah, maybe Jack, you want to comment on what's upcoming?
Sure. Yeah, we already have in-app integrations with several benchmarking services, so you can utilize that when you're making your sourcing decisions. In the future, we'll be delivering more of those as well in areas of ESG also. So it's about broadening the kind of toolbox that procurement teams can use when they're making those sourcing decisions. So we'll be expanding that in the future.
Very cool, guys. So thanks so much for coming on the show today. As we said, we could have kept talking, I think, on this subject for a little while, but in the meantime, if people want to get in touch with you to do that, directly with you, what's the best way to reach Keelvar?
Go to keelvar.com and you can request a demo, or just reach out to me, ada.holland@keelvar.com, and I'll put you in touch with the right person too.
Beautiful. And I think you guys are kicking about on LinkedIn for as well.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Doris.
And then, the last thing I'll say before we log off for the week is just to say, if you want to keep following the action on the road to the ProcureTech Cup, you have a QR code here in the middle of the screen, and you can sign up to the Pure Procurement newsletter. So weekly, give you an update on the Cup, the replays, but also some best practices on how to use ProcureTech and craft your roadmaps and get the most value for your organization without breaking your face. And if you need people to help you implement those types of things, Gabe and the good people at RiseNow, that's what they specialize in, day out. So if you're looking to launch projects in 2025, you'll know who to get in touch with. So Alan, Jack, thanks so much for coming on the show once again. And we'll talk to everybody again soon. Don't miss the holiday edition next week.
Thank you.